Oh, okay. In this video, I want to go over another chapter of this book, Animal Liberation, Peter Singer. This is a book that has ended up with a good amount of people considering vegetarianism, and I'm gonna eventually move towards the arguments that move towards being a vegetarian, but anyway, I have a previous video on this book. It's the first chapter, All Animals Are Equal, down there. It explains the first chapter. This video is gonna explain the second chapter, but not exactly in its entirety, because I would say most of the chapter is most of the chapter is statistics and stories about instances of animal experimentation and the harm it caused on the animal. Now, I'm gonna just go through. I'm gonna go through just 4 among the many that are in this, and then it's gonna basically talk about animal experimentation and experimenting on animals, and what doing that gets us. What does it get the humans? And basically, what this chapter and the last chapter are discussing is speciesism, which is like racism, but we're talking discrimination based on species, and the whole question with animal experimentation here is, does this get us anything? For one thing, does first of all, do these things get us anything? Now, I'm going to discuss these few things. One was by a psychologist named Harlow. One was about the whole rat catalog. One was about a man named Shinarelli, and another about a testing that went on at Gillette. But the big questions here, as I go through these, if you're watching this, I want you to think. The questions are: do these things get the humans anywhere? For one thing. Now, these testings will possibly get us new products, new efficient ways of doing things, possibly, and it could also give us life-saving things, which I don't think that they do. I don't think that animal experimentation would get us something that would cure something like lung cancer or something like that. I mean, I don't think it's that useful. And then the next question is, are these experiments justifiable? Because the whole question is if these are justifiable. Is if you've seen the movie with Samuel L. Jackson called Unthinkable, where this terrorist, he supposedly planted a bunch of bombs throughout the United States, and they have some kind of evidence of this, and they have the terrorist, and they're trying to get information out of him, and they start torturing him. They torture him to get information out of him, to get info as to where the bombs are, so that a large amount of people don't die. So we're talking about this ethical question with the movie Unthinkable. We're talking about the question of, is it justifiable to torture one person, especially if the person who's being tortured is someone who's not a person of high accord, or a person who really is an innocent person, which he's not. Is torture justifiable for any means? And in that movie, I would say that torturing that man is justifiable. That's the whole question: is, are there really bombs in certain places? And if there are, and he won't say where, then yeah, it's definitely justifiable, I would say. But anyway, I'm going to go into the cases. This is called tools for research. Now I'm going to talk for this. The first one I talk about is first he talks about Air Force, military experimentation on animals. He talks about the primate equilibrium platform, which it consists of a platform that can be made to pitch and roll like an airplane. Monkeys sit on a chair that is part of the platform. In front of them is a control stick by means of which the platform can be returned to a horizontal position. Once monkeys have been trained to do this, they're subjected to radiation and to chemical warfare agents, and to see how these affect their ability to fly. And this is by this is at Brooks. This happened at Brooks Air Force Base in Texas. So this is a case of military experimentation on animals. So that's one thing. Let me find where Harlow is. Harlow. Harlow. Oh yeah, okay. We should not, of course, judge all animal experimentation by the experiments I have just described. The armed services, one might think, are hardened to suffering by their concentration on war, death, and injury. Genuine scientific research surely will be very, very different, won't it? We shall see. To begin our examination of non-military scientific research, I shall allow Professor Harry F. Harlow to speak for himself. Professor Harlow, who worked at Primate Research Center in Madison, Wisconsin, was for many years editor of a leading psychology journal, and until his death a few years ago, was held in high esteem by his colleagues in psychological research. His work has been cited approvingly in basic textbooks of psychology, read by millions of students taking introductory psychology courses over the last 20 years. In the line of research he began has been continued after his death by his associates and former students. In a 1965 paper, Harlow describes his work as follows. So this is Harlow's paper here discussing this. For the past 10 years, we have studied the effects of partial social isolation by raising monkeys from birth onwards in bare wire cages. These monkeys suffer total maternal deprivation. More recently, we have initiated a series of studies on the effect of total social isolation by rearing monkeys from a few hours after birth until 3, 6, or 12 months of age in a stainless steel chamber. During the prescribed sentence, in this apparatus, the monkey has no contact with any animal, human or subhuman. And he concludes from the studies that sufficiently severe and enduring early isolation reduces these animals to a social, emotional level in which the primary social responsiveness is fear. So that's one thing. And then here's another thing that Harlow did with a colleague named Swami, S-U-O-M-I. The first of these monsters. So we're talking about what Harlow calls a fascinating idea of allowing baby monkeys to attach to a cloth surrogate mothers who could become monsters. The first of these monsters was a cloth monkey mother who, upon schedule or demand, would eject high-pressure compressed air. It would blow the animal's skin practically off its body. What did the baby monkey do? It simply clung tighter and tighter to the mother. Because a frightened infant clings to its mother at all costs. We did not achieve any psychopathology. However, we did not give up. We built another surrogate monster mother that would rock so violently that the baby's head and teeth would rattle. All the baby did was cling tighter and tighter to the surrogate. The third monster we built had an embedded wireframe within its body, which would spring forward and eject the infant from its ventral surface. The infant would subsequently pick itself off the floor, wait for the frame to return into the cloth body, and then cling to it again to the surrogate. Finally, we built our porcupine mother. On command, this mother would eject sharp brass spikes overall of the ventral surface of the body. Although the infants were distressed by these pointed rebuffs, they simply waited until the spikes receded and then returned and clung to the mother. And then they created artificial monster mothers because they found something better, a real monkey mother who was a monster. To produce such mothers, they reared female monkeys in isolation and then tried to make them pregnant. Unfortunately, the females did not have normal sexual relations with male monkeys, so they had to be made pregnant by a technique that Harlow and Swami referred to as a rape rack. When babies were born and the experimenters observed the monkeys, they found that some simply ignored the infants, failing to cuddle the crying baby to the breast as normal monkeys would do when they hear their baby cry. Other pattern of behavior observed was different. The other monkeys were brutal or lethal. One of their favorite tricks was to crush the infant's skull with their teeth, but their really sickening behavior pattern was that of smashing the infant's face into the floor and then rubbing it back and forth. So this is what Harlow did. He was mostly they're mostly doing these tests to look at the psychology here. When it seems that this is a little disturbing, I would say, and that's mostly because this test that they did is disturbing. So then after that, Harlow he was looking for emotions of helplessness and hopelessness and depression, and he put them in steel chambers and stuff like that too. So that's one. That's Harlow. And there's the whole rat catalog. If I can find the whole rat catalog. Then there's the whole rat catalog published by Harvard Bioscience. It consists of 140 pages of equipment for use in experimenting on small animals, all written in cute advertising jargon. Of the transparent plastic rabbit restrainers, For instance, the catalog tells us the only thing that wiggles is the nose. Sometimes, however, a little sensitivity to the controversial nature of this subject is shown. The description of the rodent carrying case suggests use this unobtrusive case to carry your favorite animal from one place to another without attracting attention. In addition to the usual cages, electrodes, surgical implements, and syringes, the catalog advertises rodent restraint cages, rodent restraint cones, Harvard swivel tether systems, radiation-resistant gloves, implantable FM telemetry equipment, liquid diets for rats and mice in alcohol studies, decapitators for both large and small animals, and even a rodent emulsifier, which will quickly reduce the remains of a small animal to a homogeneous suspension. Wow. That's really... Wow, okay. That's another thing, because these are products that are used for animal experimentation, and then, like, I don't know, that's very disturbing. And then there's... And, Singer, he knows that this is happening mostly because this is speciesism, and that because the suffering is not happening in a member of our own, species, that's why it's looked at as not as big of a deal. And the one thing he discussed in the last chapter is that it doesn't matter because those non-human animals don't have interests. When it's true that they do have interest, most because they have an interest for to preserve their life. I mean, there's no logic that says that a living thing that breathes, and I mean, especially a mammal, has no interests. I mean, it could be argued that living things under the animal kingdom does not have interests, but I think those also do have interests. All right, I'm finding generally. I'm just looking over 4 things just to discuss, just to show like a few of the examples Singer is pointing out to show the brutality and how sickening a lot of this is. Generally. Okay, generally. Where is it? Generally. Okay. This became in descriptions of experiments in this chapter up to now, I have limited myself to summarizing the reports written by the experimenters themselves and published in the scientific journals. That evidence cannot be accused of being exaggerated, but because of the total lack of any adequate inspection or scrutiny of what happens in experiments, the reality is much often worse than the published account. so he's saying mostly that what is actually said to happen is sugarcoated pretty much. There's much worse things, and this is what the published account Thomas Gennarelli. This became clear in 1984 in the case of experiments conducted by Thomas Gennarelli at the University of Pennsylvania. The aim of the experiments was to inflict head injuries on monkeys and then examine the nature of the damage to the brain. According to the official grant documents, the monkeys were to be anesthetized before receiving head injury. Thus, it would seem that the experiments involved no suffering. But members of a group called the Animal Liberation Front had other information. They also had learned that Gennarelli videotaped his experiments. The Animal Liberation broke into the laboratory and stole the tapes. When they viewed them, they saw conscious, unanesthetized baboons struggling as they were being strapped down before the head injuries were inflicted. They saw animals writhing, apparently coming out of anesthesia, as surgeons were operating on their exposed brains. They also heard the experimenters mocking and laughing at frightened, suffering animals. The videotapes were so damning that though it took more than a year of hard work by the Washington-based group of people for the ethical treatment of animals and hundreds of animal activists, the Secretary of Health and Human Services stopped Gennarelli's funding. Since then, other examples have come to light. This is when they talk about Gillette. Since then, other examples have come to light based usually on information provided by someone working in the laboratory who has blown the whistle at the cost of his or her job. In 1986, for instance, Leslie Fain, an animal care technician at Gillette's testing laboratory in Rockville, Maryland, resigned her job and gave Animal Liberation this photo she had taken inside the laboratory. The photos showed Gillette testing new formulations of pink and brown inks for its Papermate pens by putting them in the eyes of conscious rabbits. The inks turned out to be extremely irritating and caused a bloody discharge from the eye in some rabbits. One can only guess at how many laboratories there are in which the abuse of animals is just as bad, but no one has been courageous enough to do anything about it. Okay. And then he says this: when are experiments on animals justifiable? Upon learning of the nature of many of the experiments carried out, some people react by saying that all experiments of animals should be prohibited immediately. But if we make our demands as absolute as this, the experimenters have a ready reply. Would we be prepared to let thousands of humans die if they could be saved by a single experiment on a single animal? This question, of course, is purely hypothetical. There has never been and never could be a single experiment that saved thousands of lives. Would the experimenters be prepared to carry out their experiment on a human orphan under 6 months old, if that were the only way to save thousands of lives? And this is the other hypothetical question that Singer is posing for the people who say that. So those are the four different. Those are the four things. First of all, I honestly have read this book, have read this before, and I want to, discuss it little by little. But I think that it would be a good idea to read this book out. It would be, I think it's a good idea for anyone to read this, because there's, not only is there ethical considerations in this, but there's actual facts in this that make certain things more considerable than they might have otherwise been. So given these four things, wouldn't you say that these are taking these four examples from this book out of the many things that Singer has put in this chapter? Wouldn't you say that this is at least a little bit disturbing? I would say it is, because I would say it's disturbing, because there's not really a whole lot of benefit here. I mean, there's not a whole lot of benefit with buying things from the whole rat catalog. There's not a whole lot of benefit in looking for psychopathology in the baby monkeys. I mean, Harlow, he did a lot of things, I'm sure, but because he was in introductory psychological textbooks, but that is something that I really don't understand how that really leans towards a breakthrough in science, psychology, or whatever. I don't really see that. Nor do I see the purpose of putting the ink in the rabbit's eyes, nor do I see the purpose of the causing bullet force trauma into the heads of conscious monkeys either. So there's a couple questions here. Singer, in this chapter, he brings up the idea of ethical committees which regulate animal experimenting, which given a certain possible experiment, they would say, well, what is this going to do? What benefit are we gonna get out of this? And is there harm or suffering being inflicted on the? Well, I mean, or if there is animals in this, is there harm or suffering being inflicted on the animal? And the problem with this is that those committees would be speciesist. So the committee itself would be looking at the possible experiment in light of, in the biggest light would be what gain would humans be getting, because it's Daisy, stop it. So the problem with that is that it would be with the ideology that the humans are superior to the non-humans, and that it's okay to do certain things to preserve the life of the human. And then there comes the whole question: is certain torture justifiable if lives are being saved? And that's in the question of the movie Unthinkable. That is a certain case that I would find justified. But then on the other hand, the question of experimenting on an infant orphan to save lives. Now, that could be that has potential to be justified. It does. Just as much, I mean, because from the non-speciesist point of view, that is the orphan experiment is as justifiable as the putting animals under experiment to save lives. But under the speciesist ideology, the orphan issue would be harder than the animal, because the view is that the non-human animals are inferior. So the question here is, are experiments on animals justifiable? And I think it should be Singer notes in here that a lot of that experimentation on animals doesn't really do a whole lot to preserve our well-being. It creates new products and creates new things. And Singer says, so far as new products are concerned, it is true, as I've already said, that we would have to make do with fewer of them using ingredients already known to be safe. That does not seem to be any great loss, but for testing really essential products as well as for further kinds of research, alternative methods not requiring animals can and would be found. So it's essentially here. There's this idea that it's possible that the world could adapt without this speciesist ideology. Then back to the question of, is experimentation on animals justifiable by any means? The truth is that this trait of speciesism is not gonna really go away that soon. But there are things that can eliminate the more harsher forms. And then there's I guess the real big issue is the fact that if we're gonna ask this question, is this experimentation justifiable? And I would say no, because it's not. It's done. First of all, it's done in a speciesist ideology, as to where if someone asked Thomas Generelli or Harold Harlow, they would be more against the orphan being experimented on, because they're being used as an end for they're being used as some end for humans. And the truth is that a lot of the harsher forms, they don't really do anything that saves our life. There's not really anything done here that will save the lives of humans. There's some science and stuff like psychology done, and products are tested, and that's for new products and different things that are used. But none of it is like life-saving. None of it's really crucial. And there's a lot more bad things that go with it than good. So And then Singer also agrees. He's showing in this chapter, he shows the whole animal experimentation and how it's not at all justified, because the idea of speciesism is nor is the task of reform made any easier by the large companies involved in the profitable. So yeah, this is, and then he kind of ends this as is it possible to maybe reform this testing. And he says, nor is the task of reform made any easier by the large companies involved in the profitable businesses by breeding or trapping animals and selling them, or manufacturing and marketing the cages for them to live in, and the food used to feed them, and the equipment used to experiment on them. These companies are prepared to spend huge amounts of money to oppose legislation that will deprive them of their profit margins. With financial interests like these allied to the prestige of medicine and science, the struggle to end speciesism in the laboratory is bound to be difficult and protracted. What is the best way to make progress? Animal experimentation will only be ended when a series of piecemeal reforms have reduced its importance, led to its replacements by many fields, and largely changed the public attitude to animals. The immediate task then is to work for these partial goals, which can be seen as milestones on the long march to the elimination of all exploitation of sentient animals. So yeah, that's pretty much what it is. Exploitation. So, I myself, with respect to environmental ethics, I would probably still stick with the deep ecology part, but he's saying a lot of things here already. This is the second chapter. He's saying a lot of things here already that is uncovering a lot of things that the common person wouldn't really think about, and that's a lot of things that are hidden, and I think this book uncovers lots of it. And so yeah, I'm gonna come back with the next chapter, and the next chapter is actually about killing and eating animals rather than this one was about experimenting on them. So yeah.